What's up?
Good morning. How are you?
I'm good. How are you?
Good. You're asking why I'm not Christian. That's the prompt.
That's the prompt.
Sorry, the request if you disagree. I was just clarifying. Yeah. So I deconstructed my faith after I lost my Christian community. So that's why I'm not Christian anymore. And I went to college at the same time.
What do you mean by you lost your Christian? Like they kicked you out or something?
They yeeted me. And when you get excommunicated from any type of church, I was at a non-denominational church that was rooted in Baptist. When you get yeeted from a Christian community, a religious community, all the members side with the pastor, the minister, the dude. So they all blocked me, unfollowed me. So I lost like 100% of my Christian community, and I started to go to college at the same time. So not having that constant influence from other believers, sharing God's stories, reading Bibles together, going to Bible studies and doing worship nights, having all of that just taken away instantly, like I started deconstructing. It happened on accident.
Yeah. That sucks that happened to you. That could definitely hurt somebody for sure.
Well, I mean, it sucked at the time because I lost 100% of my people, but the deconstruction part wasn't based on her. It just happened kind of on accident because I was going to college, I was studying psychology, took neuroscience classes, and through all of those studies, I was like, oh shoot, like I can debunk my religious experiences with this.
Okay.
You'd be surprised. Sorry, go ahead.
No, okay. I got you. So what you're saying is you had a bad experience, which then led you to deconstruction, which then led you to other reasons other than the emotional hurt as to why you deny Christianity, right?
Exactly. Yes. Thank you for listening.
Okay. So what is I mean, I'm sure you have a lot, but what would be the top one, I guess, that you say that is a logical reason?
Okay. So I was a Christian for 27 years. I was raised to genuinely believe that the Bible is the inerrant word of God. The 66 books are exactly the way God intended it. There are no contradictions. There are no mistakes. Literally, the 42 authors were basically puppeteered to write every single word because John 1:1 says the word was with God, the word was God. Yeah. And I truly believe that. And when I started reading the Bible, I started realizing that it does a couple things. I used to believe that the earth was 6,000 years old. The creation story was true. And I quickly learned, studying science for the first time as an almost 30-year-old, because I went to Christian school, they didn't teach science, that the universe cannot be 6,000 years old. We have trees that are older than the supposed flood. We have rocks in Canada that are 4 billion years old. Like, it's impossible. And I started learning about the dating mechanisms, ancient civilizations that are older than the earth. And that kind of shook me. And then I went to the Word and I started seeing some contradictions, and I started seeing some inaccuracies. And that was very troubling. And that's kind of what made me lose my faith, was starting to read the Bible from not a pastor's point of view or a Sunday school teacher's point of view, but from like an actual, non-emotional point of view. That really shook me because that was my faith. So once I figured out that the Bible is inaccurate, it does have contradictions. It was my solid rock, my foundation, and it turned into a sandcastle that just blew away instantly.
I understand.
A big shift for me.
So I totally get that. So I have a decent Christian following, and I do have a lot of Christians that are Protestant, and I love them. Okay, but this is one of the problems of Protestant Christianity. It is not the original teachings of Christianity, and I grew up Protestant most of my life, so I totally understand how that paradigm fell apart for you, right? Because I went through a similar thing. The difference is I didn't leave Christianity. I'm not saying I'm better than you because of that. I'm just saying we just we absorbed it differently. Um, but the problem is this paradigm, that these belief systems that they instilled in you, this idea that there's 66 books, this idea that everything has to match science, this idea that it is inerrant, meaning that I do believe that the Bible is inerrant when it comes to the theology. I do believe it was written by man, and therefore, and because we didn't have the technology to perfectly transcribe and copy everything, there's going to be some challenges to the text if you're going to look at it to the smallest detail. Um, so if you have that paradigm that is actually perfect and that God puppeteered, like you said, these authors into writing something which we don't, which the original Christianity doesn't believe that that happened, then of course you're gonna run into these things that you found, and it's going to shatter your worldview. But the problem is your worldview of Christianity was based on a false view of Christianity. That's
Why
the
do you say that?
Well, because Protestantism is not. I'm not saying they're entirely wrong, but these ideas that they put in you are not the original teachings of Christianity. Like it's not.
I went to 4 different denominations
Okay.
in like 5 churches total in my lifetime, and I attended each one for very long periods of time.
Mm-hmm.
And like me as a believer, I could never even. I would be too afraid to say that the Bible's just written by man and they didn't understand what they were talking about. Because then, for me, as a believer, if I just admitted, oh, it was just written by man, of course it's going to have inaccuracies, of course it's not going to make sense sometimes, then I would say, okay, well, yeah, how about the part where Jesus rose from the grave? Then that's just made up. Like, how far do you want to take it? Like, do we just want to believe the stuff we want to believe, and then we're just going to disregard the things we don't agree with? Like, to me, it's either all or nothing. When God says, if be hot or cold, but if you're lukewarm, or spew you out. And I'm not calling you out. I'm just saying this is my faith. There's no way I could just be like, I like the Jesus rising from the grave. I disagree with the creation story. No, it's all or nothing. Like, you have to take it for all, or admit that these 42 dudes were all kind of trying to make it up as they go, thinking it's real when it's not, making up the part where Jesus rose. Because even in the resurrection of Jesus, every time Jesus showed up, there was like a couple conversations of, who are you? Who are you? Who are you? Before they were like, he was like, I'm God, I'm Jesus. And they're like, oh crap, you look nothing like him. So even in the resurrection story, it's a little flaky and finicky about Jesus rising from the grave. So if you're going to say the stuff that we can debunk, sorry, I have allergies, debunk with science is man-made, but then the Jesus rising from the grave is real, like, I don't know. I just feel like that's not, I don't have a lot of confidence in what you're presenting.
Yeah. So if a Christian is going to take the position that this is that they were puppeteered by the Holy Spirit, and these are the exact words of God, just puppeting humans to write it down, and that this is perfectly going to be in line with science. I mean, if we put that standard down, then of course it would have to be all or nothing. Otherwise, that standard would fall. But the problem is that's not the standard of the original Christians. Even the Jews that put together the Hebrew Bible, that's not even their standard either. So that wouldn't even be the original. If that was the original stance of Christianity, I don't think I would be Christian. Um, I would also leave. The problem is, I know you said you tried different denominations. I'm assuming, I don't know what they were, but I would assume they were none of them were an apostolic tradition. I'm an Orthodox Christian, so I would, yeah. So that would probably
I went to Apostolic Pentecostal, but
that's
no,
not.
nothing was Orthodox. It was all Baptist.
Yeah, yeah.
No,
So those are not actually Apostolic Pentecostal are not actually apostolic. Most of them actually preach
It's
they
not
don't even.
Orthodox.
Yeah. So, anyways, I would venture to say that they would all have similar issues, maybe not identical, but similar, kind of on the same category. Now, when it comes to the resurrection, we do have. I do agree with you as far as like you need to agree with the concepts of the Bible. I don't think you need to agree with the creation story as far as like it needs to fit exactly scientifically, because the creation Genesis is not a science book. It wasn't meant to be described in exact detail scientifically. It was meant to be described in a way that it is describing the events that are happening, but it has a deeper theological meaning to it. Because
What?
what Genesis is doing, it's laying out the foundation for the meaning of the rest of the Hebrew Bible. So it's kind of laying out, it's kind of introducing certain themes that will start to make more sense later on. So there's a deeper meaning to it.
I understand what you're saying. It's not a science book, but it's making science claims. So I'm going to call it like an attempted science book because it's making attempts at making scientific claims.
You can call it whatever you want. That's still not the intention of the author. So you can say whatever you want.
Can I ask you a question about it?
Mm-hmm.
You don't think the Earth was made in 6 days?
Well, the way it was described, I'm going to be agnostic on the scientific of it because I'm not taking it as a scientific claim. The reason why it was mentioned to be made in 6 days and he rested on the seventh is to show a deeper theological meaning to it, like the Sabbath and the eternal rest that we will have in Jesus, who is the Lord of the Sabbath, etc. So all of these things have a deeper meaning.
Can you explain that to me? I'm confused. Why, like how, and I mean this in good faith. How you're tying the days of creation to the Sabbath? Can you explain that to me?
Yeah, because the seventh day is when he ceased to do any work, and that became a core as far as like the Jewish faith, as far as their everyday life. They wouldn't work on the Sabbath. All of this started to connect together to eventually the death, burial, and resurrection of Jesus. So, in order for me to like give you a full explanation, I mean, this is a deep theological topic. I'm to be honest with you, I'm not going to go deep into it. I'm just telling you the point of my response is I don't expect you to accept it or say, oh, that's the explanation and just take it. I'm just telling you that I don't take this as a science book. I take it as a theological book.
So when it says he made the days, or he made, light and darkness on day 1, day 2, sky separated the waters, day 3, land, plants, and seas, etc. You don't think that's happened?
No, I do think it's happened, but the description and the details of it is not going to be. It doesn't necessarily have to align science because the details that they're going into are more laying out meaning theologically rather than exactly what happened. So, for example, you can have two people that witness a car crash.
I'm going off the app, but I'm listening. If it drops me, I'm going to try to come back. So, sorry, go ahead. I'm listening.
No problem. So you have two people that witness a car crash. You have one person that describes every detail of it. This car was blue. This car was black. He turned right. He turned left. Ran a red light. Hit him on the side. T-bone. Blah 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 blah. Right. That's a full description of a testimony. But then you have another person that doesn't go into the details of what happened, but goes more into the details of the meaning of the crash. Well, I think the reason for the crash was you have this stoplight here that is off here and there, and then going into a different concept. They're both describing the same event, but they're describing it in a different level. So it's possible to give an account of creation and not go into a scientific detailed explanation like you're expecting, but go into more of a theological meaning that lays out the groundwork and foundation of the rest of the theology in the Hebrew Bible. So it's a in order to read Genesis, the creation story, and take it as a scientific claim, you're actually stepping into it with a wrong paradigm. So that's all I had to say. I know you're away from the app, probably doing something, but if you're not coming back soon, you can come back a little later or something. But I would like to go into the resurrection, if that's cool. Did you mention that?
Can you hear me? Oh, sorry, my headphones dropped out. I was talking. Sorry.
Oh, okay, no worries.
Yeah, we can talk about whatever. I just was curious. We don't have to talk about creation if you don't want to anymore. If you think that the stuff listed in order in the creation story is exactly how it happened in real life.
Yeah, I'm agnostic if it's going to whether if now there when I say agnostic, I'm not denying it or saying I just haven't studied it like that. There are other Christians that are more into science that probably can make a better explanation to it. I don't look into that stuff because I read Genesis for what it is. It's a theological book. So I look into the theology of it. I'm not necessarily interested in knowing if this matches science or not because it's not important to me. Now, it's important to other Christians, and you can talk to them, and they'll probably have a better explanation for you. To me, I don't see the importance of it having to match science. I don't. It's something that I learned when I deconstructed that allowed me to see Christianity in a different light. That made way more sense. That's for me. But there are other Christians that are into that stuff that you can talk to. I'm just not the guy for that. Now we can go into the resurrection if you want.
That's fine.
Okay. So what are you familiar with historians and the minimal facts of the history of Jesus that even atheist historians are gonna agree on?
Yeah, there's what's his name? Yeah, there's a couple secular historians who claim that Jesus was a dude walking on earth. What's his name? Josephus was one.
Yeah, he
He
wasn't
was a
he wasn't a
historian who's secular.
yeah, he was an atheist, but yes, he was a historian that wasn't Christian.
Yeah,
Yeah,
but he said yes, Jesus was a dude that had been roaming the earth. He just didn't claim that he was a miracle performing dude.
yeah. He did report that other people claimed that, but he didn't affirm that. Yes, that's correct. So the even modern day scholars today that are atheists, and they are taking into account Josephus and other historians during that time period. They were what they agree on the four minimal facts using the historical method today is that number one, Jesus was a real person. Number two, he did in fact die on that cross. Number three, he was put in the tomb and it was empty after 3 days. And number four, his disciples that walked with him had a genuine belief that they witnessed him resurrected. They don't affirm that it happened. What they're affirming is they believe that his disciples genuinely believed it happened and weren't just trying to fabricate a story. Now, you can check these four minimal facts. That's why I was asking if you know about this or not. But if you don't, you can fact check me on that and come back another time. But for
I'm
the
so
sake
sorry. Can you say the four facts? I know you just said that.
No
Can you say the
worries.
four facts one more time? I'm
Yeah.
writing them down.
No worries. The number one is Jesus existed as a real person. He was a real
Okay.
historical figure. Number two, he actually did die on the cross. There's no debate over that. Number three, he was put in a tomb and it was empty after 3 days. And then number four, his disciples that walked with him had a genuine belief that they witnessed him resurrected. Now, I need to clarify that further. I'm not saying that the historians are affirming he resurrected. I'm not even saying that the historians are agreeing that he actually did with them. What they are saying is that even though we can't affirm that it happened or it didn't, because historians are not allowed to affirm a supernatural event, they can affirm that these people had a genuine belief and didn't have a motive to lie or fabricate the story.
I 100% am following, and I 100% agree with those four claims you made.
Okay,
I
cool.
agree.
All right.
I agree that did occur. He did unalive on the cross. He was a real dude. He unalived on the cross. The grave part, I didn't actually look into that, so I'm not going to make a positive claim that the grave was emptied. Although that wouldn't have shocked me if it was emptied, because it kind of had to have been emptied. That was the kind of the prophecy, so that makes sense that it would have been emptied. And then that his prophets or his disciples, apostles, unalived themselves for the cause, which means they genuinely believed it to be so. Okay, so cool. I totally am with you on that, and I agree that those did occur, except the grave one, because I just haven't looked into that.
No worries. Yeah, and you can look into it, and you can fact check me if you want, and come back another time. But for the sake of argument of where I wanted to go with this, being that you agree with most of it, right, except for the grave, you need to look into. My question for you is, what would be the best natural explanation for the empty tomb and them believing that they saw him resurrected?
Well, like I kind of meant, I don't know if I mentioned this here or if I mentioned this on the other lab I was just on. He wasn't. Oh, I did mention this to you. He was unrecognizable. They were like Mary and I believe Mark was mourning because Jesus wasn't in the tomb, and then a dude was standing there, and she thought it was a gardener. She didn't even know it was Christ, and that happened a bunch of times with the disciples, where Jesus showed up, and they were just like, "Who the heck are you?" Mm-hmm. And so for me, with them seeing him in the Gospels, they didn't even recognize him, and so for me, I'm like, yeah, it would make sense that somebody who looked nothing like Jesus or looked a little, dissimilar. They have the same regions, expressions, whatever, the beard, the hair. It makes sense that somebody would be like, "Oh yeah, I'm Jesus," because it would benefit that person is to do that. And I've seen, like, I just watched a documentary recently where there's this guy in some random part of the world on a mountaintop claiming to be the Messiah, Jesus, and everybody in the village goes and like wears white and just listens to him speak because they think he's Jesus. And so it makes a lot of sense that somebody would claim to be the resurrected Christ. I don't think it actually was him because they didn't even recognize him.
Okay, so your first, what you're saying is that somebody could have claimed somebody, yeah, they got deceived. They could have claimed it or whatever the case is, and
100%, because we see that every day. We see people get deceived on a daily basis.
Okay, let me ask you this: are you married or anything like that, or do you have like a sibling or anything? Do you think that someone can pose to be someone that you have known intimately, and pose to be them and not be able to recognize them?
I would be able to recognize my husband, but if he came up to me and he was like, "Hey, it's me," and then said some inside joke that we said or whatever, like, I would know it was him. My first question would not be like, "Oh, husband that I've been married to for X amount of years, are you the gardener? Are you the guy at the coffee shop?" Like, I would just know it was him. And that's why I think that story is a little shaky for me, is because they didn't recognize him. Even somebody dedicated like Mary, because you could say the disciples had a lot of pride. They all denied him, etc. Thomas completely doubted him the whole time, except before he put his hands in the wounds. But Mary was like, she was ready to be right or unalive. Like, she was at the grave by herself. Well, in one of the books anyway. In Mark, she was by herself. Yeah. And she ran to get to the disciples. They went, and when they saw he wasn't in there, they just went home and had dinner. And she stayed there. That's how dedicated she was. So the fact that she didn't recognize him, I don't know. That seems a little weird to me.
Well, it wouldn't be weird. And the reason why I didn't go into this, it wouldn't be weird, once again, if we understood the theological implications of the resurrection. And once again, everything goes back to Genesis. The reason why they didn't recognize him is because he's in a glorified state. He is still a human, but he's not in the same human state that we are. Okay, and that's why they were not recognizable, or he wasn't recognizable. So, but that goes into another rabbit hole. My point is, what I was bringing it on into was, I don't think it would be one hell of a deception if somebody who wasn't Jesus posed to be Jesus and was able to convince several of his disciples that knew him intimately and not be able to be called out as somebody who is deceiving them, and somebody, especially somebody who could be skeptical or actually ask him questions of something that is intimate, and be actually convinced to the point that they'll be willing to die for the fact that they saw him resurrected. That's one hell of a, like, the probability of that is probably low, because like you said, even if it was your husband and you didn't recognize him at first, you would be able to ask him questions that only your husband would know, right? And maybe, okay, give you the benefit of the doubt, maybe one person can, maybe he can pull it off with one person, maybe even two, but there's several of them that walked with him and were all willing to die for the fact that they saw him resurrected.
I mean, I know, like, as a believer, I would have said that same thing. But you really have to understand the way people's minds work.
Mm-hmm.
There is a guy in 2025 who's posing as Jesus, and there is an entire tribe of people that hike 7 to 8 hours every day on that service just to hear him speak.
Sorry to interrupt you, but I'm with you on that. But none of those people actually walked with Jesus before he died. So
but that's what I'm saying. That's why they didn't recognize him, and so people can easily be deceived because humans want to hold on to hope.
It would be more likely for somebody who's never actually walked with Jesus before he died to be deceived. To your point, if somebody was doing that and he did it to people that didn't walk with Jesus, it would be more likely for the deception to happen there. But for the people who actually walk with Jesus to be deceived, it's much more unlikely.
I only disagree because there are so many people I've met in my real life who will tell me all the time. I saw my husband who has been unalived. He was in my kitchen. I saw my daughter who lost her life. She was in a car that drove by me. When people are experiencing mourning and pain and sorrow, you start to see apparitions, and it's not because it's a real ghost. It's your brain trying to comfort itself. And so if you have somebody who's like, I'm Jesus, and Jesus said he was coming back, or Jesus said, or if you're missing Jesus a lot, you're going to want to hold on to that hope. You're going to hope that person is the person you're mourning. That's just how our brains try to cope with unalivement because we can't handle it. And it makes a lot of sense. And to say that they did it so much to where they unalived themselves, well, I mean, do you know how many people were unalived in Jonestown? It was 900 people. And they took it. Now, some of the parents forced their kids to drink it, of course, but
I think you're missing my point. I'm not disagreeing. I'm not disagreeing with the fact that people can be deceived and misled. I'm not saying that. What I'm saying is, given the circumstances of his disciples, and not to mention that I didn't even bring this up, not to mention the fact that he was able, this supposed person that is posing as Jesus and deceives his disciples. Not only does he deceive the disciples that intimately knew Jesus, and they were to the point where they were willing to unalive for it, but somehow also pulled off the ability to make the tomb empty as well. Which, if you take all of that into account, in order to follow the historical method, you need to have an explanation for every single one of those things that are actually plausible.
Yeah, but this was back and I'm sorry to interrupt.
No, it's all right. I was done.
You have to understand, there was only it was very known what was going to happen. It makes a ton of sense that would be easily fabricated. This is the time with no CCTV cameras. There was not a lot of people around. It would be very easy to snatch that bod and put it somewhere else.
How? How would that be easy to do that?
Because all you have to do is in the middle of the night. It's not like we're talking about New York City where there's millions of people. We're talking about a tiny tribe in the middle, a tiny place in the Middle East.
Okay. So here's why that doesn't work. The tomb was guarded by 4 Roman guards. Each one of those guards could take on 20 people at once. These people that would have had the motivation to do it wouldn't have had any motive to gain. What would they have gained to risk their lives doing it? Even if they succeeded and defeated the Roman guards, what motive did they have to risk their lives for it? They didn't gain anything from it other than persecution.
The people that snatched the bod?
Yeah, what would they gain from it?
It was probably an insider thing because it just shows that the religion was true.
Yeah, and what would they gain from doing that?
Having Christianity be one of the biggest religions in the 21st century. I mean, there was a lot to gain from that.
They didn't have anything to gain from it at the time because the majority of people, it would be a disadvantage to believe in a monotheistic God at that time, especially a God that you believe that incarnated and was humiliated on the cross, put naked. It benefited them. It didn't. So. Okay, so but you're missing. Hold on.
Claims you're making, we could
hold on. You did interrupt me at that point. So
God,
you
calm
gotta,
down, dude. It's fine.
yeah, okay. I'm just saying this now. You did interrupt because you're missing the point. And don't get me wrong, like we can end this conversation like you don't have to accept anything I'm saying. What I'm saying is if you're not listening to my points and you're just going to cover your ears, then it is what it is. There's no point in even
I'm
having the
listening,
conversation.
and I'm also giving you how other people in their religions have done the same thing, and that's why it would make sense that somebody for the Christian faith would have done it. For instance, you have Joseph Smith claims that he found the golden tablets. Who saw it? Who saw him take out the golden tablets?
It's completely different situation. So born again.
There was
When
8 witnesses, and they all agreed that he found
born
the
again,
golden
if you would
tablets.
hear my point, you would understand how this does it. Well, I don't know if you're actually going to listen, but just to put it out there, if somebody was to fabricate a religion for people to follow, there's much easier and more effective paths to follow at this time period than risk your life to fight off 4 Roman guards, actually accomplish the mission, and make Christianity true, a religion that nobody wanted to follow because this you're worshiping a God that turned himself man and humiliated himself and shows no type of power to give you prosperity, doesn't give you any power to for any health or any superpowers or anything like that, like the other gods at the time. In fact, it was opposing all the beliefs that people would follow a god for, and people were spitting on it. They were being persecuted for it. None of Christianity did not have any traction whatsoever until centuries later.
But here's what I think. I genuinely think the Roman guards they were on the inside. I genuinely think the Roman guards were up to no good. I think they snatched the bod.
You need
and
to
when
prove
all
that.
this stuff happened, I think it was fabricated. We see that in religion all the time.
You need to prove that.
There's billions of people around the world that worship very different variations of gods. You have religions that say, oh my God, this God did this and this God did this. I can't think of any right now. Okay, they all have different things, and all the people that follow those religions believe those things happened. You say, why would they risk it? If they were Roman guards that were doing the snatching, I mean, because they were on the inside, they actually liked Jesus and they were trying to push for it. You have to realize that people will do anything for their faith.
So born again, there's a reason why even the historians that are atheists wouldn't agree with you on this, and they actually leave it to mystery. The reason why,
an assertion. You're just assuming.
Okay, you could look it up and you can tell me, look, when it comes to the historical method, you need to have an explanation for certain things. Now, the reason
my explanation was it was probably the Roman guards.
But you need to, that explanation is not plausible because
that actually makes more sense.
Actually, it doesn't. Let me tell you why. Because when you're a Roman guard, first of all, the Roman guards are working for Rome, and at the time, that area of Judea was a troublesome area. Like because they had so many wars against the Jews, because the Jews refused to be occupied by an outside empire, but they finally submitted to Rome, and they were taxing the hell out of them, and they were always worried about a rebellion. There was always groups trying to rebel, and it eventually started to happen to the point where they destroyed the temple in 70 AD. Now, the reason why that's important is Rome took it very serious to keep them oppressed. This idea of a Messiah, this idea of the Messiah coming and being king, is a direct threat to what Rome had to do. When you were, let me please finish. Let me please finish. When you were a Roman guard, it wasn't like today that if you were caught doing something, you were just put in jail and put into court. Not only would they unalive you, they would unalive your whole family. They would find who your family is. They would unalive your mother, your father, your siblings, and your babies. They would do all of that just as a punishment for being a traitor to Rome. So what gain did these Roman guards have to risk all of that?
I don't think you understand how people work. If the Roman government are that big of D-bags, which you're admitting they are, the people who are soldiers working for them are not all 100% going to be loyalists if they're forced to work for them. It makes sense that there were some Romans that were like, you know what, Jesus, he is the Messiah. I genuinely believe that. I can't admit that because I'll get in trouble. But like, hey, let's have him rise from the grave. I'll have some of my buddies come grab him, and then I'll pretend that an angel came and I'm scared. Like, you're acting like that's not a possibility. That could have been.
It's not a possibility.
So what's more of a possibility?
Well,
a man rising from the grave
wouldn't be
is more
plausible.
of a possibility than somebody hiding the body. Like,
here's the thing, born again. Look. I think we've reached to the point where you're hitting a wall, and this will be cognitive dissonance. If you're just going to deny, that's fine. I'm actually following a method called the historical method that all historians use. You're actually stepping outside of the method, meaning that you're actually not logically following how even history works and how to determine what history is or not. Now, if you want to make your own standard on how history works, that's your prerogative. But that's saying
that's a scenario.
It's a scenario. It's a scenario that
it's
a scenario that's not plausible. And if it was plausible, that would be a common explanation for what happened with the empty tomb. But notice it's not. They don't have an explanation for it because you're not the first person to come up with this scenario. Host,
can I say something real quick? You told me the 4 claims. I said I've looked into 3 of the claims. The 4th one, him having his body emptied, him not being in the tomb, I have not looked into that claim. You are not providing me the evidence that it was an empty tomb other than it just feels right in your soul. So I'm saying, because I haven't looked into it, I don't know what historians are saying. I'm not taking your word that they're all admitting that it was an empty grave, so therefore magic. I'm not, because I haven't looked into that. That's
then you need to go look into it.
I'm granting you that it was empty because I haven't looked into it yet. And I'm saying if it was, based on historic fact, I'm going to assume they're going to say the Roman guards had something to do with it. That's what I'm going
Then all right, then stop making it. I've actually studied it. You haven't. I'm not asking. I'm not actually. I'm not actually. Hold on. I'm not going to go. You go ahead. I'm not expecting you to take my word for it. Go ahead and study, like you said, and then you can come back and then we can have the conversation. But if you're going to, even though you agreed on it for the sake of argument to proceed,
I haven't looked into it.
You said from the beginning you haven't looked into it, but then you agreed for the sake of argument of moving forward so we can have the discussion. Now, if we reach the point where you can no longer take what I have to say because you need to do the research, then we should end it. Go do your research and come back.
If you know about it.
Go. You said you were going to go look into it. Just go look at.
I will, but you can tell me. You haven't told me anything about.
Go look at Mike Lacona, Gary Habermas, Bart Ehrman, and N.T. Wright on those 4 historians on the resurrection. You can look at.
But tell me what they say. If you've already looked into it, tell me what they say about it.
I'm not gonna go into the whole thing.
But it's your job to debate me.
No, it's not.
If it's
not my job. It's your job.
It's
your job, if you're gonna deny Christianity, to know what the hell we believe.
I know what you believe. Quiz me on the Bible.
And you never looked into the empty tomb. Yet you feel like you know what we believe.
Because I don't believe Jesus.
This is the most basic fundamental of Christianity. Even it says in our book. It even says in our book that if he didn't die and resurrect, our belief is in vain. Yet this is the most fundamental. Oh, now you're crying. This is the most fundamental belief of Christianity. Yet you haven't looked into it. Now that's fine. I wasn't holding that against you. I wasn't holding that against you. I wasn't. Okay. See you later. Have a good day. I wasn't holding it against you that you didn't study it. I was okay with having a conversation with you. However, don't start crying that you don't know about this stuff and then claim you know everything about Christianity. Quiz me on Christianity. I deconstructed my faith. Yet you never looked into the most basic fact of Christianity, which is the resurrection, the empty tomb. You never looked into the historical evidence of it. What did you deconstruct from it necessarily? What, because you believe creation is a science book and that's what caused it to debunk it? All right, fine. I'm empathetic to all of that. But I'm not going to be empathetic when you're making this claim of, oh, I debunked it from Christianity and everything, and I understand all of this stuff. Oh, and then start crying that you don't know the facts of the historical evidence of the empty tomb. And you want me to explain it to you? You're not going to take my word for it anyway. You weren't listening to any of my points. I made all the points that they make already, and you still weren't listening to it. So I'm going to waste my time talking to you about it. Go do the research yourself and come back once you're more prepared. Cognitive dissonance, man. This is crazy.